Welcome to VUC 2019, Visions Under Construction. And these are exciting times we're living in because we're going to be in Berlin May 6th to 8th for Camaillo World. Nir, are you? Our guest is Nir Simionovich. Are you guys, one of you or both of you, going to be in Berlin?
Unfortunately, this year not. We're going to be in the US. At that specific time, I'm going to be somewhere around San Francisco. Eric is going to be actually around that time in Italy.
Are you, is there some place where people can see you in San Francisco? Are you going to a convention or to a conference?
We'll be presenting and basically doing a roadshow. So we're currently out meeting with multiple VCs, investors, and so on. So it's part of our, we call it the US invasion.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. All right, let me just continue with this real quick. So, Camaillo World, I'm really sorry you're not going to be there. Nir and Eric generally bring some of the best wines. ComCon, July 7th to 8th. Look at the slide in the background.
Yes, we're going to be there, and we are going to be there, and we're going to do something really crazy. So we're going to be joined by two other companies as well in this crazy thing that we're going to do. We're not telling what it is yet. I'm letting Dan, pull the surprise on this one. But all that I can say, it's going to be really crazy.
That's great. And since you mentioned that, I've got to say that Nir in particular, but Eric was also, Eric brought his book around last time we were there last year, but Nir's presentations are well worth the price of admission. Let me just get the last slide here, which is our friends at ClueCon, and we know all these people. It's August 5th to 8th in Chicago. And with that, I'm going to switch my camera over. I have to comment because I have to remember what I'm trying to do. Otherwise, you forget as you get older. There we go. So, first of all, Cloudonix. Who's got the bird calls going? Is that you?
Yeah, I'll just silence my phone here. That's...
WhatsApp. Tell me.
Yeah. It has this thing of bugging you exactly when you don't want it to bug you.
Right. We're going to get into the digital withdrawal pretty soon. But all kidding aside, or all seriousness aside, depending on what you want, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the topic today, not everybody knows you. You and I have been friends probably 10 years, maybe, something like that, which is a long time. Not that long in my lifetime, but probably longer in yours. Anyway,
it's about a fourth of mine now.
It's been a while.
Yeah,
we first met at some obscure, might have been a MooCon or one of those. Anyway, terrific. So I've seen many of your presentations, and the one on was it Fail to Ban? No, it was the thing that it gets into your network and sees what's online. Showdown.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah.
It might have been Failed to Ban combined with that thing, but that was great. So those are fantastic sessions. I don't know what you're doing. You got your mystery session going, but it's going to be great. Sorry, I don't think I'll be there, unfortunately, but it's a terrific conference. Let's talk a little bit about the origin of the country too, if you want. No, the origin of the company, because not everybody knows, and you've been through Greenfield, and I don't even know the 4 or 5 other things. A paragraph on your origins.
Okay, so a bit of history. So Cloudonix is effectively a spin-off out of Greenfield Technologies. So over the past 10 years, Greenfield, let's say till about 2015, Greenfield was very much focused on being hired hitman. So you would come into various carriers or startups or whatever companies, and they would challenge us with various communication issues, ranging from software, switching, transcoding, anything that really required a higher skill than your normal, let's say, communication people. And we would come in and look at the problem and build various solutions. Somewhere around 2014, we actually realized that the world is rapidly changing. So we started moving into a mobile-first environment. The various companies out there in the world, specifically companies like Counterpath and Zoiper and VaxVoip and Acrobits and everybody were scrambling to create these really cool stacks in order to develop soft phones on your mobile device. And we were experimenting with all of them. And they're doing a pretty good job. Let's put it this way, the experiences Zoiper have, and same as Counterpath and Acrobits, they've gained a lot of experience over the years. But what we noticed was that although the stacks were available there and they were working fairly well, they really weren't that equipped into a mobile environment. They were excessive a little bit on CPU. They were excessive on battery consumption. They were excessive by the way they were doing things. And the worst thing that we could find about them was that they required to be very much, I would say, tied to a very specific workflow. So they were limited to the original SIP workflows. And those workflows, unfortunately, were not designed for the mobile environment. So we literally sat down and figured out, okay, this doesn't work for us. We need something else. And we started developing our own stack. Originally started, like everybody else, PJ-SIP. That's what we did. Soon to realize that although PJ-SIP is an awesome tool, no question about it, we still use it. By the way, we think it's one of the best projects around, one of the best SIP stacks there is. But at the same time, it didn't present us all the capabilities we wanted. It was very capable of giving us a stack, but when it came to creating new workflows, it was fairly limited. Also, the various integrations that we wanted to integrate new codecs, to integrate new mechanisms into the stack and into the capabilities of any application, they weren't there. So we did that. Shortly after that, so we had the first version of the stack somewhere around mid-2015. And we started to see, okay, let's see where we can connect this thing to. So we had two amazing tools that we were able to connect to. One was Asterisk and the other was FreeSwitch. Pretty cool. Chameleon was, of course, a given, and same as OpenSIPs, because that's where we came from. But what we noticed was that none of the commercial offerings out there can actually sustain what we were able to give. So we said, okay, if nobody can sustain this and nobody can actually use it to the way we think that needs to be used, we'll simply build our own. So that's basically when Cloudonix was born. We actually built a platform out of a need. The need here came not only in terms of servicing the SDK, but was also to look at the problem of interconnecting between companies, enterprises, and consumers in a new way. And particularly enabling them to be, on one hand, completely anonymous to the actual service provider. Because if you think today of companies that utilize various communication platform as a service, you will need to provision each and every one of your users on their platform. They own your users. So our customers required to be everything anonymous, and they wanted everything to be over the top, to be completely encrypted and secured. And later on, also GDPR compliant, HIPAA compliant, and ISO certified. The things became really complicated as time progressed. So Cloudonix was born, as I said, out of a necessity. As we grew, as the platform evolved, we added more and more features. So today, the voice part of the platform includes full compatibility to a Twilio-compatible API that we actually call it CXML, but it is an extension beyond what Twilio has. So it introduces new verbs, new primitives into the actual protocol. We have additional tools in there, such as contextual data embedding. There is a messaging API, and the messaging API is really interesting because it is not a chat API. It's again, we're taking the Cloudonix as a platform is what we refer to as an unopinionated platform. It means that it will not introduce or affect your existing workflows. If your workflow is something that you want to do, then Cloudonix will provide you the tools to do it. You don't need to abide by specific workflows. So as we evolved, that's how Cloudonix was born. Today, we service multiple enterprises in various verticals. So naturally, the telecom industry uses our stuff. So you'll find alternative roaming applications or alternative calling applications working on our platform. At the same time, you will find a technical support company that uses our tech in order to do technical support from their mobile application completely over the top and enable them to reduce their fraud cases and in cases of identity theft by almost 20%. So from an enterprise point of view, that was really important. We even have right now a customer that is literally building a full-blown communication platform as a service on top of our offering. So they are a mobile carrier, and they've been suffering revenue losses due to various CPaaSs over there that, that emerged over the past few years. And they said, okay, we need a piece in that game. So they're actually using our platform to build that. The capabilities that come in are far beyond just communications, and that is where things get really interesting. We are getting to this point, and you just, before we started, you mentioned the oven you just bought.
Right.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned how could it be that my Bluetooth headset doesn't know that I want to switch to it? How could it be that my computer doesn't know that I now want to do something? And I'm going to ask a different question. Why doesn't your house knows that you're currently in the living room watching Game of Thrones and you're not to be disturbed? Now, what I just described, when you think about it, it's almost science fiction, right? I think that everybody saw these. Are you familiar with there used to be a show on TV called Eureka. Have you ever seen that?
Eureka?
Yeah.
Yeah, the dystopia or something like that. When it was something like that, a future sci-fi.
It's a sci-fi show. Basically, talks about a town in the U.S. that is completely invisible. Everybody there are scientists and geniuses, and all the houses have artificial intelligence computers that machines that basically take care of anything. But you don't really need to go there. You don't really need to create an artificial intelligence to manage your house in order to enable that. We live in a world that is, I would say right now, and if James Bodie was here on the call, would most probably smack me in the head. We currently live in a world that is fundamentally broken from a technology point of view. And it is broken because it is separated into silos.
Yeah, that I could agree 100% with that statement.
Okay. These silos, it wasn't designed to be like that. It was an evolution thing. And these silos exist. Now, sometimes you get two silos to be able to converse with one another. For example, I can have my mobile device have an application that talks to my TV, and then I will cast stuff from my phone to the TV. It's not really casting, but that's not the question here. The question here is different. How could it be that in a world where technology is everywhere and we're able to traverse packets and data from one side of the globe to the other in seconds, actually less than 100 milliseconds, where infrastructure is so good, you no longer think about the overall terabytes you're downloading every day or uploading every day, and yet my TV doesn't talk to my fridge. And I think it's something that I want. And this is basically where Cloudonix is going from a technological point of view. One of the tools that Cloudonix has inside the platform is what we refer to as a messaging API. Now, that's a very big statement. What is a messaging API, right? What do you think when you hear about a messaging API? What is the first thing that comes to your head? That's not a rhetorical question, by the way.
Oh my God!
This is me becoming the interviewer. I'm going to interview you now.
Messaging API. Yeah, you're sending a request out to something, and something's coming back. I guess that's the only thing I know.
What kind of request?
Well, messaging could mean a lot of things because, you know, when you talk about object-oriented programming, everything's a message, right? So if you're talking about, do I have any, let's see, I don't know. I can't answer that question without a lot more information. It's probably too much information.
Exactly. That's exactly the point.
Oh, good. I get it right in.
No, it's the exact right answer. Because right now, if you will go on the internet, okay, and you will write in Google messaging API.
That's a great idea. I'll do that.
Okay. The first thing that pops up is SMS API, MMS API, how do I send text messages, and eventually chat APIs.
Let's see if that's true. I'm going to tell you, of course, if they screw with the results, right? So this, I can see this is already.
Look at what you get.
Well, this is already, there's already a couple, the first two are marked annonce, which means advertisement in French. Okay, so we maybe skip those. Messaging API, the first one is line developers, developers.line.biz. Remember, you know, they know I'm in France, and I can see that it's in French, which I usually turn off.
Most messaging APIs that you will find today are designed to do a specific workflow. You do a messaging API for push notifications. You do a messaging API for text chat. You do a messaging API for something that is very isolated.
Do we have Slack?
Chat.
Real-time messaging API. You've got SMS, as you said. Obviously, SMS is going to come up from Twilio, by the way.
Exactly. So there.
Hubnub.
Hubnub is again text.
Sendbird.
Again, text.
W3.org. Now we're getting into the more geeky.
It's all text.
Yeah,
so
it's all text. You're right.
They're all text-based.
You know, WhatsApp Business, single API for your messaging needs. That sounds.
Okay, go in, and what do you get? Text messaging again.
I think so. Yeah.
Because we've been accustomed, the entire world over the past 10 years had been indoctrinated to automatically think of text messaging when you talk about messaging.
Yep. Right.
And we looked at that and said, that is fundamentally broken. And what we said is, okay, let's create a messaging API or messaging infrastructure that will enable you to converse not between only people, person to person, but person to machine and machine to machine. So this goes one step beyond. The idea was to create an environment where machines, any type of machine, it doesn't really matter what type of machine you're using, can utilize that infrastructure and talk to other machines in the same way. So effectively, what we've done is, to the lack of a better analogy, we had simplified the concept of building communication protocols between devices, where previously you needed to create a server on one hand and a client on another, and then connect them and invent your own wireline protocol. You don't need to do that anymore. You can use that messaging API and at the same time be very simplistic about it. So effectively, it's only a WebSocket-based API. The beautiful part is that it is not a point-to-point environment, which means that you can create what we call channels. Inside a channel, you can put multiple entities. So a channel can represent your house, where your TV, refrigerator, phone, dishwasher, laundry machine, and hot water boiler all talk together. Here's a crazy scenario. I'm going back to the Game of Thrones concept. You're sitting in the living room seeing Game of Thrones, and the TV now notices, because it's a smart TV, that Game of Thrones is going to be over in like maybe 20 minutes from now. So it notifies your hot water boiler to turn on because it knows that you will want to have a shower because that's what you normally do.
After Game of Thrones is probably necessary, yeah.
Yeah, for example, I don't know. Just a crazy idea, okay? All of that, and that only represents, I would say, 5% of the use cases or ideas that can be done. one of our customers actually created a proof of concept, which was really interesting. They created a mobile app that utilizes, on one hand, the ability of the SDK to do voice over IP, creating calls between their device, a mobile application, to their call center directly over the top, fully encrypted and everything. But at the same time, they enabled the messaging API to have the agent speaking to the consumer to activate his camera. Why did they want that workflow? Because they're creating an application that will enable consumers to talk to, I don't know how to define it, as to other professionals, let's say electricians or plumbers, to be able to show them what's going on. So the agent will be able to take a picture, activate a video session, and then be able to work from there. And that call flow today doesn't exist. If you want to do it today, we have what's referred to as omnichannel. But omnichannel is not really omnichannel. It is vendor omnichannel.
The case you're describing sounds a little like a case I had a couple of years ago. Of course, went through messaging with a doctor, where I had a condition on my eye, and I called her like on a Saturday, and she was kind enough to say, "Okay, send me a photo." You know, so obviously MMS. But the point is that transaction went down, and then she said, "Oh, don't worry about it. You know, we'll take care of that next week. It's not a thing. It's not a big deal." But the point is that if you could do this in one transaction rather than the back and forths,
right?
Plus, in the case that you described, maybe you need video to show that the washing machine is jumping up and down about 2 feet or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is exactly where we're going. We are moving very rapidly into a world where, on one hand, consumers will no longer be willing to accept the fact that in order to support them or provide them with a service, you will need to utilize 2, 3, or 4 different tools. We're moving very rapidly into a place where starting to change the various workflows inside existing consumer centers or care centers, depending on how you want to describe them, is something that the enterprise will not be willing to do simply because it's too expensive. There were multiple experiments here in the US with companies large enterprises trying to incorporate video and WebRTC type solutions into their existing workflows. The result is that they all failed. And they failed mainly not because the tech wasn't good. The tech was awesome. Mm-hmm. It failed because the workflows weren't properly integrated. And people who work in call centers, people who work in customer care cannot jump from one workflow to another. It's very hard. We live in a reality where our attention span is no longer than 15 seconds. And that means that for me as a consumer, if I'm calling a call center and I need to explain for the next 2 minutes what I'm seeing in my bank account and what entry there doesn't make sense, and I need to either go into details what I think, then we've done something wrong. We're wasting time.
You just cited the nightmare case, though, because when you call the bank, you enter all your account numbers, social security,
and then they ask you the same thing over and over again.
Then they ask you again, the live version. This call may be recorded for quality.
You mean for no quality assurance, because that is not a quality service.
Yes, exactly. As a matter of fact,
this call may be recorded. Yeah, quality control. Oh, like that's a thing.
Exactly.
Anyway, yeah, okay, I see that. That makes sense. And the audience for this is
here's Eric.
Here, the renowned science fiction author, Eric Klein.
Hello all.
On the promo. Good to see you, Eric.
How you doing?
So I was about to say, Nir, the people who you are addressing here as potential people who, organizations who would be interested in this are what level, what size, and where are they? And
Right.
what business are they? What vertical market are they in?
So right now we're aiming towards the, I would say, consumer-facing companies. So our first go-to-market right now is to work with companies that have either existing applications or existing call centers with either a web app or mobile app that is consumer-facing, and then enabling them to integrate our tools. The overall results right now show that companies, depending on the size of the call center and the number of consumers, can save sometimes up to 50% on their existing infrastructure costs because everything goes over the top and no more 0800 lines, no more DID numbers, no more inbound, no more outbound. But at the same time, due to the fact that you're able to dramatically reduce the call handling time and the time people actually spend in building context inside a specific, let's say, session, the result is that they're sometimes able to reach 20, 25% savings on their overall consumer care costs. And just to give a rough understanding, one of the metrics is that we've seen, which when I will say it right now will sound, oh, that's not a lot, but it adds up really fast, is that one of the metrics that is well known is that every minute an agent is on the phone with a customer costs the enterprise $1. Now, when you're thinking about it, that's not a lot of money. So $60 an hour, no big deal. Multiply that by 300 agents. So that's $18,000 every hour. Multiply by 10 hours or 12 hours a day. That's $180,000 every day. That means that companies, enterprises like Bank of America, Chase, Walmart spend several millions of dollars every month just on that.
And that's also why those services are generally not, I don't want to say they suck, but they do, basically. You mentioned a keyword that I'm interested in, which is context, and I'm not sure you meant it in the same way. You can confirm or disavow, depending.
Okay.
Tim Panton mentioned context. We were talking, I don't even remember exactly what we were talking about, but it had to do with call centers. And I think it was with regard to the wave of web calling, click to call and all that kind of thing, the very primitive days of that.
Right. That's exactly, yeah, it's very similar.
But what he was saying, which made total sense, is that because I kind of, the idea was kind of like, well, what's the difference between call me back, you click the thing and they call you back, which I don't know who wants that. The only advantage of that was you didn't pay for the call. But the point is that if it's a local number or an 800, a toll-free number, the other thing was to click for the chat and then it could elevate to video or audio. But the point is, the context we were talking about was what, the simplest idea would be the device you're on. Are you mobile or not? The location, are you moving? Things like that could be transmitted. Yeah. And I think the idea of moving, I mean, you might be on I don't know, you're not going to make a service call on a subway, I guess. But the point is, the point being that the more context that you get, like you're on a tablet? Are you on a mobile phone? Are you on a desktop? What's the speed approximately of your internet connection, and so on? And this all creates, at the same time, it creates a privacy nightmare because your footprint is so evident. But at the same time, that context could be important to getting better service. So it's kind of a compromise there. Anyway, is that the context you were referring to, or were you talking about something a little more general?
Yes, and beyond that. So what is context? So right now, you and I are talking, okay? So we have a context that had been established through the first 2-3 minutes of our conversation, and we're now having a discussion based on a predefined context. When you think about context, and Tim has one vertical of context, and the technical vertical is very important because having a technical vertical that knows exactly how you're calling or how you're communicating is important, because right now our technical path is basically Google Meet and the fact that I'm talking and you understand, and we both talk English. This is the context of our conversation from a technical point of view. But context is mostly information, and it's mostly related to the thing that enabled me, or sorry, not enabled me, but more catalyzed me into an action. So an example for context, and I'm going back to the banking application, for example, I want to be able to look at my phone in my bank application, and I'm looking at my account balance, and there's something in there that I'm seeing, well, that transaction looks a little weird. I don't know what that transaction is. I want to be able to click on that transaction, and it gives me a little bit of information. That's normal with every application. But I want to have a little button in there that says call the bank. And when the call goes out into the bank and is being answered at the other side, number one, I don't want an IVR system to ask me questions. Yes, I do want to be greeted. Hello, Mr. Blah, 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 blah. We're transferring you to an agent to handle your request for said transaction. And when I talk to that agent, he will already know that I want to ask him a question regarding a very specific entry in my account balance.
What? You're going to pass context? You want contextual communications? That implies respect for the customer. We gave up on that in the last century.
I'm sorry, we're old school.
Yeah. So it's beyond the contextual data that you can provide. For example, as an app vendor, what most app vendors keep inside their app is what's called the usage funnel. It means what screens were you looking at before you initiated the specific action, and how did you get there? That context of what you did is incredibly important, because normally it has to be verbalized. Now it can be traversed from the app directly to the call center, privately, encrypted, secured, fully compliant with various regulations for privacy, and without exposing any type of personal identification data within the transit. When you're doing it on a phone call, you're susceptible to eavesdropping, you're susceptible to identity theft. There is no way of clearly identifying the customer on a one-to-one basis. But when I do it from an app, the app can be biometrically secured with a fingerprint or a Face ID. And it is a unique device. I can extract information from the device itself to transmit over to the remote bank to say, oh, this is the only person I'm allowing, or this is the only device that I'm allowing to access the service.
Right. We was experimenting with the angle. Yeah. I had a comment. Let me try to fish it out of looking at Corrado horizontal.
Yeah. Hasn't sending context into call center operations been sort of a holy grail for quite some time? I remember there's a gentleman, his name eludes me, but he's up in Toronto, and he had a company that was doing something like that. But it started out with simpler things like automatically navigating IVR trees. That's sort of like a foot in the door, and then becomes something else, right? Was it Phonolo?
Wow, I don't recall what company was doing that, but that is the first step.
That's correct.
That was the first try. But it's failed, and it's failed because the only thing it did was create kind of like a out-of-band solution to bypass the IVR in some form, and the only thing you were experiencing was the bloop, 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 bloop on the phone, and then you get to where you want to get. But eventually the context still needs to be built. So what do people do today? So I saw somebody showed me this week a solution here in the US that when I saw it, the only thing I commented was, that is potentially the most moronic solution I've ever seen. So this get this, it's a web widget that you put on your website, and for every page that you visit on the website, it will, when you click on the call button, it will give you a different 0800 number for every page.
How we used to put a different email address on every page to see where they were sending the email from.
I saw that, and I said,
1992.
I saw that and said, oh my God. On one hand, I'm thinking pretty cool. That's not a bad way to build some form of contact, because I can assign, a specific number to a specific visitor that is currently watching a specific page, potentially logging on to a specific session. But at the same time, I'm thinking about the other side, what a nightmare to manage all these 0800 numbers. What a nightmare from the enterprise perspective to integrate that thing, because they have to query an external system of what really happened. And you can put it directly inside the call transit. You can put it directly in there. Why aren't we doing it today? Why do companies don't do it? Very simple. Because for the past 60 years, they've all been indoctrinated to doing the same old thing over and over and over again. Pardon the expression, or the analogy, because this is going to sound really bad, but it's like being married to an abusive husband. He keeps on beating you, but you never do anything about it because you kind of have gotten you're kind of accustomed to the status quo. I know it's a bad example and a bad analogy.
I was trying to think of something to lighten that up a little bit, but
you went much too dark on that one. Try something a little bit less dark.
I know. I'm sorry. It was the only thing that I could think of in order to explain the magnitude of what enterprises are doing so wrong. All of us, we've been working with enterprises for what, 20 years now? Michael, you've been working with multiple enterprises in the US, what, 20, 30 years now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they all do everything over and over and over the same.
Well, we suffer the bar of low expectations, right? And that is, we've been doing everything the same. We've been achieving very little. and yet that's enough, right? It's the old nobody ever got fired for buying IBM.
Right.
Until they did.
Until they did, exactly. But we can do so much better.
Well, I know, as we discussed my new oven before we started, the oven doesn't have a button to call the blah, blah. It's connected to Wi-Fi, right? By the way, I disconnected it. You know why? Because
you don't want anybody to activate your oven from remote because they hacked your house.
Well, no, I did a showdown, and apparently it's not visible. But the funny thing is, yeah, the oven notifies you when the timer, if you put something in for 20 minutes, it notifies you. But it notifies you like 2 minutes later. I can hear the little chime. I don't need 2 minutes. I don't need more notifications anyway. But the point is that one of the things that they brag about in the manual, which was not a selling point for me, was what would you call this? When if you have a problem, gee, I don't understand how the timer,
teleconference support.
It is. It's support, and actually, I think it's more if the thing just doesn't work, because it has. By the way, there are 3 or 4 different pages that describe the licenses, the open source licenses. That's got to be common with appliances now, right?
Right.
So there's 3 separate pages on the various software.
Have you seen the licenses on Alexa?
No, because I don't have one, and
like on the Echo devices, it never ends.
I'm not having that stuff in my house, but I have this oven which I disconnected. But the point is, if you call them, they can go take a look at it if it's online. By the way, I don't know how they do that, because, like I said, Shodan does not show it.
It connects the other way.
I don't know. Well, there's no button or any. Well, maybe there's.
You don't need to. You can send it a push notification from a remote server. It will be received as a long HTTP pull, and then it will connect back through a tunnel.
Yeah, there you go. There's some kind of a system for that.
But with our messaging API, you don't need that.
Anyway, it's not generally visible. My total point of this all was that that's an interesting thing, and it would be interesting to do that with your car. It would be interesting, I don't know, car. It'd be interesting to do it with a lot of devices that are smart. And yet I somehow doubt the efficiency. If the oven stops working, I think it's better to just call somebody and say, come over and look at this, than to have them I can't even think of the right verb.
Well, on one hand, you're right. If something breaks into the point where it doesn't work anymore, I want somebody to, to come in and fix it.
Well, it's going to need an IC. It's going to need.
It's going to need some hands-on anyway. But
so,
in many of the cases,
let's plug it, turn it off, and turn it on.
Yeah, in many of the cases, companies can go and do preemptive. Think about it. Like, there are ways of diagnosing any type of machine or device to understand it's about to fail.
And the question there is, you have to design the device with respect to being sort of self-instrumenting. You have to have an awareness of what it's doing. Like cars have a central computer, and you can ask the car, "Hey, how you feeling?" and it will check it out, which is not unlike something from Star Trek. Run a full diagnostic. But for example, while I'm looking around me here, I can't think of anything around here except for saying, this or that has, inordinately high or low current draw, or even temperature sensors, right? I mean, in mission critical computers, do we put temperature sensing in, and they're more instrumented, so we know what's going on, and then we have management systems that we can talk to and all that. I have a question for you though, and that has to do with a slightly longer term view.
Okay.
As we build these wonderful things, all the machines are talking to each other. We effectively build the Matrix. Right?
Skynet, not the Matrix. This is Skynet.
The problem with Skynet is if you build Skynet, you have to license the name and whatnot from Chris Matthews, and it's just not worth the money. So anyway, the whole thing is, what does this do in terms of? I keep thinking products, and it might be products, but you have products based on services. And services that are continually evolving, and products with limited lifespans. I spin this back for you.
Okay.
Over my shoulder there's a Polycom VVX 1500. I'll get it out of the way.
Yeah, I got one of those. No longer working.
You know what? 11 years ago they were introduced. I powered that one up yesterday for the first time. It saw a provisioning server, took down firmware, got firmware that was released in January. I mean, it took it half an eternity to do the update and whatnot, but came up and was happy as a clam, and it's still the best sounding single phone I've ever heard. It's a beast. It's like an early Mercedes. But here's the problem. At some point, right, that device is no longer serviceable. And in fact, cheaper devices, we discard them. They don't have the memory. They don't have the whatever. The OS is dated, So how do we build something? How do we build an entirety, which is going to include the systems you're selling, that lives on into the future, and where upgrades are not forklift upgrades, and how much does it cost us, or at what point? I mean, I'm thinking, do you have any first generation Echoes? Are they still serviceable?
I think they are. I know that the first generation Apple TVs still work. I got one.
Right.
I know that.
And so I guess the thing is, as a service like yours grows over time, do products come and go? I mean, I'm just wondering how painful that is.
I'll say this. It's very much dependent on the industry. So, let's take the automotive industry as an example, which I like that industry because the evolutions in that industry are relatively slow in comparison to our world. So things will change every 3-4 years, not every 3 months. So if you take right now any car, and I'm putting the Teslas aside because that machine is, I hadn't gotten to play around and hack each one of those, but if you look at
it's not really a car, it's a smartphone with wheels.
That's a good definition. That's awesome. Specifically with that enormous, touch screen in the middle.
That's being much too kind. It's
kind
a
of like a
5-year-old
Knight Rider
tablet.
thing. Yeah.
It's a 5-year-old tablet on wheels, not a smartphone.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So take any modern vehicle today and take their, let's say, avionic computer that controls your car, and take the entertainment system and rip them apart. Take them out and see the actual tech that drives that machine. And you will see that that machine is driven by a very low piece of tech. If you have there a 2-core CPU, a 2-core ARM 700, or an ARM 7 with 2 cores, or an ARM 8 with 2 cores, like, I'm surprised because most of them are still single cored. They're relatively slow and relatively small. So,
and is it running QNX or something like that? Or,
some use QNX, some use RTOS, some use whatever. It doesn't really matter what they use. I think that our problem is that we have gotten to the point where we've accustomed ourselves and have conditioned ourselves, on one hand, as technology evangelists / users / power users, to always go after the next, the new thing. While at the same time, industry doesn't follow that fast in specific verticals. So if we've reached a point where service providers build tech that is no longer backward compatible or cannot be used by older machines simply because they're slower, then we're doing something wrong. So example, one of the things that was very important for us in the SDK was to enable support for example, Android. Android is incredibly fragmented. To enable support on Android officially from version 5 and upwards, 5.01, because that is the minimum level of version you will find today. 4.4 no longer out there, or lower. But what we then figured out and we saw, and this is actually one of the interesting parts of what we do, is that even with version 5 and onwards, those devices are fundamentally different. Oh, yeah. Right now, there are over, and Eric, correct me if the number is wrong, there are over 23,000 different devices out there that call themselves Android.
And they have only that much in common, right? They're only the layer of commonality.
Exactly. The layer of commonality is just barely the operating system. They are fundamentally different. Electronics, plastics, the way they behave, the vendor-specific implementations, the vendor-specific modifications to Android that they've done, and that creates a very big challenge. So that fragmented market of devices creates problems in 2 different layers. On one hand, there's a UI issue because the screens are very different. If you ask any type of mobile designer or mobile app developer who develops a UI-intensive app, he will tell you the worst thing you can think of is adapting his application to any device on the market. And that's why we have, all these QA device farms and so on. But when you think about what we do, for example, enabling an audio SDK that works on 23 or 24,000 different devices, and each one is fundamentally different at the electronic level, it means that the various audio paths that you have, speakerphone, headset, Bluetooth, and earpiece, work differently. For each one, you had 2 choices of implementing 4 different configurations. That means that for every device, there are 182 different variants of configurations for each one of these devices. Multiply that by 23 or 24,000 different devices. There is no enterprise, no company in the world that can adapt their code to all that device space. So that
somebody has to do an abstraction layer, and that somebody makes somebody makes their living by abstracting it out to some common. I mean, it's the Java virtual machine, isn't it? Where we write to that it doesn't.
Wait, but that abstraction is to lowest common denominator of the top of the line.
Or the problem with that abstraction is that it will abstract the code primitives. It will not abstract the unique profile of that specific device.
Sure.
And for example, one of the issues that we had from day one was one of our first customers came to us here in the US and sent us this horrific, I call this case of the rogue tablet. So they sent us some really funky Android-based tablet that was doing all sorts of weird things when it comes to moving from one audio path to the other. And then they sent another one that did something else. And we were like saying, no, this is stupid. Where we're going to issue an SDK update for every little device that comes out? In 2 years, the SDK is going to be enormous. It will be unmaintainable. We need to fix this. We basically think about it, let's look at a little bit of an analogy here. In the past, companies used to have servers, racks, data centers, server rooms. They don't anymore. Everything moved into the cloud. Why did it move to the cloud? Because companies realized it will be far more economical on one hand, and from an operational perspective, it is a far better thing to do. Not only to abstract the layer of how it works, but also to completely take it out of the equation as to who needs to maintain it. So we said to ourselves, this is the same thing we want to do. We want to take the same capabilities that AWS introduces to the IT industry and take it back into the powers of the mobile developers and the app developers and the product developers and enable them to do new things without actually worrying about the underlying infrastructure. And when I look at the world today, this is where we need to go. Today, if you look, for example, if you look at Twilio's annual report, you will see that Twilio invests every year millions upon millions of dollars in physical infrastructure. But at the same time, that is unreasonable. I'm going to say something really stupid right now. Pay attention to this. Eric, I know that you're hearing me, but if you can get the power supply from my bag and bring it because my computer is about to die. See, why do I need power for my computer?
Actually, one of my pet things would be, but it doesn't work for me, unfortunately. But one of my pet things would be, how we have computers powered over USB-C now, which is nice. But I would like to be able to actually use a computer that could be powered over Ethernet, and then I'd use some super high power over Ethernet thing to actually run it.
Well, PoE by default is 48 volts, so you can do that technically.
Well, and there are two new standards now. One that'll deliver up to 80 watts. So we're getting close, but it's just going to mean that you have to have a PoE capable switch that basically has a fan like a turbo engine in it. I mean, it's
personally, I think that not choosing the original Tesla beam the electricity to devices concept from the early part of the 19th century, we really missed out on something there. Who needs all these cables?
We have so many people, though, who are like, how to put it? Well, to borrow something from earlier in the week, you get cancer from windmills or you get cancer from cell phone radiation. I'm like, if we had wireless electricity, inductive phone chargers, they give you cancer. Anyway, but so it's all good, though. You're powered up now. Everything is good. And now your CPU won't be scaling back either.
Well, I'm going to hand it to a Mac. When it comes to video, it knows that video is on. It doesn't scale down that easy.
Cool.
Okay, well, we're 4 minutes from the hour. Not that we have a constraint, but at the same time, it's nice to keep it within that envelope. What we need to do is figure out where to send people to learn more about this. If only there was a place they could just type into a keyboard.
So the best place to get in touch with us is simply, number one is to go to the Cloudonix website right now, and you can sign up, and we'll send you a copy of the SDK and provision you on the system. You can try our APIs and play around with it. They're pretty cool. Be advised that the website is not that good. I need to do it again.
As long as there's a contact there. And by the way, of course, I'm putting my little SoundCloud thing on here for my music. Eric. Hello, Eric. We need to bring Eric in. Do you have a copy of your book handy? That
Not on me, no. Sorry.
Mine's upstairs.
You don't keep one physical on you?
I thought I should have
Stop carrying it back and forth because it was going to rain today.
If I run up, let's see, we have a couple of minutes. Let me run up and get that while everybody else gives their little URLs. Well, Jay's still with us. I thought he was leaving. Jay, why don't you do a little minute or two on your, because I was going to ask you this anyway, and I'll run up and get Eric's, God, if I can find it, because it's in the bookshelf. Let me get Eric, see if I can get Eric's book.
Hold on a second, Randy.
Yeah.
I can do
you
something.
maybe have an image. Yeah, maybe.
I can put it up, the picture of it.
Yeah, that's good enough. I was going to show that I actually had the real book signed and everything. But
I'd have to actually find the picture I've got of you with that.
There you go. But we need to cover the book. Oh, yeah, this is screen capped. All right, wait a minute. Hold on.
Can everybody see that?
Yep. The one cruise through the solar system. Available on Amazon in every country in the world except Saudi Arabia. No, I haven't.
And I'll give a little hint. World Book Day is April 23rd this year. So for that week, I have it the ebook on 99-cent special. So if you get online the week of April 23rd, you can get it for a discount. Or if you get a hard copy and we can get together, I will be happy to autograph.
There you go. I have one of those priceless editions. I have the.
So have you had the ebook read to you by your Echo or some such?
Not me, because I don't have an Echo, right?
We don't do those kind of tech. We just enable them.
Well, Eric, you should probably actually do the narration of the book yourself and put it someplace. That can be done. It would only take like 6 days, but
I could do an audiobook. Actually, if I do that, I'd probably want to team up with somebody like Ellison and get the female voices done right.
There you go. That'd be fantastic. That's a great idea right there. Great idea right there. Okay, so I'm okay. Cloudonix.io. I did want to mention we do this every Friday at 12 noon Eastern time, which becomes 1700 hours UTC, 6 p.m. here in Central European time, which is Paris, Berlin. In Israel, it must be
7 p.m.
7, I was going to say 7, yeah. That was right.
8 p.m. right now.
Yeah,
it starts at 7, yes.
Starts at 7. I'm pushing the Sabbath button, Sabbath button on my oven. Oh, it's too late. Sun's down. No, the sun is up. Is it 6 o'clock or is it sundown, by the way? I need to get that straight. Where that starts. Friday
Shabbat starts at sundown.
So it's
and comes out when you can see 3 stars the following night.
Okay, but it is actually when the sun goes, because right now the sun is out and it's like 7 o'clock here. Okay.
Well, that's it. So in December, Shabbat comes in at like 4 o'clock, and in August it comes in at like 9.
Right. So I can run up and push that button for tomorrow, right? I've never tried it. I'd like to try the mode. I don't know how that works. But they do make a big deal out of it in a page in the manual. Eric, you weren't here. I got a new oven and it's got that mode in it. So
I understood. The Shabbat mode is basically it keeps it on a low setting for the entire weekend, so you don't turn it on and off, creating a spark.
But I think I thought that it went on to cook something though at a specific time. I think that's
it can be set as a timer also.
Right. So it turns out you don't touch anything. Your roast cooks,
and it's all automatic.
You only just open the door. Anyway, what else, Michael? Anything before we go?
No. It's been a harrowing week, but I won't go into the details.
Okay. Cameo World, these two gentlemen are not going to be joining us, but we're having a VR wine tasting. And in the VUC panel in Berlin on May, whatever the Tuesday is, 7th, I guess it would be. Okay.
Eric, turn off your mic.
Thanks to Eric, yeah. Oh, Eric,
Sorry.
you're in a noisy location. All right. Anyway, thanks, you guys. It's great always to have you. We are going to be back next week with the mystery guests that we don't even have any idea who they might be or whether there will be anybody. Maybe it'll be these two again. Maybe they want to come back and finish the session.
I don't think so because we're probably going to be in flight.
Okay. We're going to be in flight as soon as I find the button to do this.